For 30 years, America thought it knew Merle Haggard, the rebel, the outlaw, the voice of working-class pride. But listen, that was only half the story. Behind the hits, behind the flags and prison songs, there was something he never fully talked about. Something that followed him everywhere he went. You know, some men run from their past, others turn it into music. Merle did both. Because while the world cheered his honesty, he was hiding a life shaped by fear, guilt, and a secret that never really let him go. And here's the part most fans still don't understand. The songs weren't just stories. They were confessions. Quiet ones, careful ones. But the truth? The truth didn't come out all at once. It leaked, piece by piece, over decades. And when it finally did, it changed how people saw him forever. So stay with me, because what you're about to hear isn't the legend you know. It's the man he spent 30 years trying to outrun. Merle Haggard wasn't born into music. He was born into uncertainty. A boxcar, that's not a metaphor. That was home, you know? When a kid grows up without walls that feel solid, without ground that feels steady, something shifts inside him early. Merle learned that lesson fast. His family had already lost everything once. Fires, poverty, starting over with nothing but stubborn hope. And then, when Merle was just a boy, it happened. His father was gone, sudden, no warning, just like that. And listen, this is where things changed. Because losing a father doesn't just leave sadness, it leaves questions, anger. A feeling that the world can collapse at any moment, so Merle didn't trust it anymore. While his mother worked long hours just to keep food on the table, Merle was left alone with his thoughts. And those thoughts, they weren't gentle. School didn't make sense. Rules felt pointless. Authority felt temporary. You know how that goes. If nothing lasts, why behave? Music became his escape. Not fame, not dreams, just survival. A guitar didn't judge him. A song didn't abandon him. But outside that music, the trouble was already forming. Small things at first. Skipping school, petty mistakes. But listen closely. This wasn't rebellion for attention. This was a kid testing the world, seeing how far he could go before it pushed back. And the world did push back. Hard. And that push sent him down a road he wouldn't talk about for decades. But that's not all. Because the next chapter isn't about a boy anymore. It's about a young man who started running and never quite knew what he was running from. By the time Merle was a teenager, he wasn't living life anymore. He was escaping it. You know, some kids get into trouble to be seen. Merle did it to disappear. School was just a place he passed through. Authority, that meant nothing to him. Because when you lose stability early, rules feel optional. So the stealing started. Small at first, then bolder. And every time he got caught, something strange happened. Instead of fear, he felt relief. At least now, someone was paying attention. Juvenile detention came and went. Warnings didn't stick. Punishments didn't slow him down. And then one day, he ran. No plan, no destination, just motion. Freight trains, highways, long nights with nothing but noise and thoughts. You know that feeling. When standing still hurts more than moving. That was Merle. He worked whatever job would take him. Cooking, driving trucks, hard labor, not chasing a future, just outrunning the past. And here's the part people miss. Even then, music followed him. He'd sing in bars for a few dollars, not for applause, for validation, for proof he wasn't completely broken. But trouble has a way of catching up. Bad choices stacked up, wrong people, wrong nights, and eventually, the running stopped. Not because he wanted it to, but because a cell door closed behind him. And listen, this was the moment everything changed, because what happened next didn't just shape his music, it redefined who he would become. And trust me, it gets darker from here. Prison isn't loud the way movies show it. It's quiet, heavy. And when Merle walked into San Quentin, he wasn't tough anymore. He was terrified. You know, there's a moment when bravado dies, when the door shuts, and you realize you're not in control now. That moment stayed with him. Days blurred together, metal sounds, eyes watching, silence that felt dangerous. And then came the news. The kind of news that makes a man go numb. His marriage was already over. His life outside? Gone. Listen. This is where most people collapse. Some men harden, some break, some never come back. Merle nearly didn't. He gambled, got into trouble, lost prison jobs. At one point, he even talked about escaping. But then, something shifted. Not hope, not faith. Perspective. He saw what happened to the men who didn't change, he saw futures disappear, and it scared him straight. So he did something nobody expected. He slowed down, got his GED, took steady work, started thinking, and music came back, not as a distraction, but as a lifeline. Then one night, something happened that burned into his memory forever. Johnny Cash walked into that prison and sang. About prisoners, about regret, about being trapped. You know, when a song feels like it's aimed directly at you, that was Merle. In that moment, he realized something dangerous. Music could save him or destroy him, because if he ever got out, those bars wouldn't leave his voice. And even when the gates finally opened, he didn't walk out free. He carried San Quentin with him, on stage, in every lyric, in every silence between words. And the world, they would feel it. But they wouldn't understand it. And that is where the double life truly began. When Merle Haggard walked out of prison, freedom didn't feel free. It felt fragile. You know, when you've been watched long enough, you keep looking over your shoulder even when no one's there. That was Merle. He went back to work. Hard work, quiet work, digging ditches, keeping his head down, trying not to mess up again. But music wouldn't leave him alone. So he stepped back onto the stage, small rooms, cheap bars, no spotlight yet. And here's the strange part. The songs sounded different now, darker, heavier, more honest. People leaned in when he sang. They didn't know why, but they felt it. Then came the records, the Bakersfield sound, raw, unpolished, nothing like Nashville. And suddenly, the ex-con was climbing the charts. But listen closely. He wasn't celebrating, because every time a song hit big, he worried someone would dig too deep. I'm a Lonesome Fugitive. That wasn't just a title, that was a warning. The public thought it was storytelling. Merle knew it was autobiography. He didn't correct them. He let the myth grow, and it worked. #1 songs, sold-out shows, respect. But behind the applause, there was silence. He didn't talk about prison. Not really. Not even with the people closest to him. Because fame gave him something prison never did. Distance. Distance from judgment. Distance from the past. Or so he thought. Because then, one song changed everything. A song that turned him into a symbol. A song that split audiences in half. And once it hit the radio, there was no controlling the narrative anymore. But that's not all. Because the world didn't just hear the song, they misunderstood it. And that misunderstanding would follow him for the rest of his life. When that song came out, everything shifted. People didn't just listen anymore, they picked sides. You know the one. The song about pride, about small towns, about values people felt were slipping away. To millions, it sounded like an anthem. To others, it sounded like an attack. And Merle? He stood right in the middle of the fire. Here's the part most folks miss. He didn't write it to start a war, he wrote it from memory. A sign on the highway, a flash of childhood, a picture of the world his father came from. That's it. But once the song hit #1, it didn't belong to him anymore. Politicians praised it, crowds demanded it, the media simplified it. And suddenly, Merle wasn't just a singer, he was a symbol. You know, being misunderstood is one thing. Being frozen inside that misunderstanding, that's something else. Behind closed doors, he questioned it. Did people really hear what he meant, or just what they wanted? He gave different explanations over the years, sometimes serious, sometimes half-joking, because the truth was messy. And Merle hated mess in public, so he smiled, played the song, let the image grow. But inside, that prison door slammed again, because once the world labels you, it doesn't let you change. And listen, that pressure didn't fade. It followed him home. Into his marriages, into his nights. And that's when the cracks really started to show. Because holding up an image for too long will wear a man down. And what came next? It wasn't loud. It was slow, quiet, and far more dangerous. Fame didn't break Merle all at once. That's not how it happened. It wore him down. You know, when the noise fades, when the crowd goes home, that's when the real fight starts. And his fights were happening late at night, alone. Marriages came and went, love burned fast, then burned out. He tried to hold it together for the kids, for the band, for the image, but the pressure never stopped. The road, the expectations, being frozen as the man people thought he was. And listen, this part matters. He wasn't chasing chaos, he was numbing exhaustion. Drinking got heavier. Other habits crept in, not to feel high, but to feel quiet. He later admitted it himself. A midlife crash. A moment when nothing brought joy anymore. You know that feeling. When even success feels heavy, that was him. The industry moved on, new voices, new faces, and for the first time since prison, he felt invisible. But here's the twist. Instead of chasing trends, he turned inward. The songs slowed down, got more honest, more tired, more real. He stopped pretending he had answers, and slowly, he started telling the truth. Not loudly, not in headlines, but in lines like, "If I could only fly," that wasn't metaphor. That was a confession. Because after all the running, after the fame, after the misunderstandings, he was still that boy from the boxcar. Still carrying the weight, still trying to make peace with it. And that's when people finally saw him clearly. But the ending? The ending isn't about collapse. It's about what he left behind. And trust me, this last part changes everything. Merle Haggard didn't live a double life because he was fake. He did it because some scars don't heal out loud, you know. He turned fear into music, mistakes into meaning, and silence into songs that still hit deep. The world heard an outlaw, a patriot, a legend. But underneath it all, he was just a man trying to make peace with his past. And maybe that's why his music still lasts, because it wasn't perfect, it was honest. So tell me, did this change how you see Merle Haggard? Drop a comment. Subscribe for more stories like this, because some truths take decades to surface, and they're always worth hearing.